Ladies and gentlemen, do you still remember the stars whose light burned too brightly, too quickly, and was ultimately extinguished by alcohol? In today's emotional journey, we will look back at 13 iconic figures whose lives ended in tragedy. Lives marked by brilliance, fame, and the quiet battles that no one truly saw. These are the voices silenced by addiction, the talents lost to a struggle that fame could not protect them from. Some of them drank to escape loneliness. Others used alcohol to numb pain, pressure, or the shadows of their own minds. But all of them left behind unforgettable legacies, songs, films, memories, and moments that still echo across generations. Do you remember any of these stars? Do you recall where you were when you heard they had passed away? Share your memories in the comments below. Your stories help keep their light alive. Shall we begin with the first tragedy?
Amy Winehouse, 1983 to 2011. Her final day was heartbreakingly quiet. On July 23, 2011, Amy Winehouse was found motionless in her London apartment, her body giving out after consuming a lethal amount of alcohol. There was no chaos, no dramatic scene, just a young woman alone in her bedroom, a silent ending to a life that had been anything but silent. Coroners later confirmed what many feared. She had drunk far more than her fragile body could withstand. The tragedy struck the world like a punch to the chest. How could someone so gifted, so young, vanish in such a lonely way? Amy was no ordinary artist. Born in 1983, she rose from a teenage jazz prodigy to one of the most influential voices of the 21st century. Back to Black turned her into a global phenomenon, earning her 5 Grammy Awards in a single night. Her voice carried pain, beauty, rebellion, and a haunting honesty that few artists ever achieve. But success came with a cost. The pressures of fame, relentless criticism, and her lifelong battle with addiction tore at her from every direction. Fans mourned her as a once-in-a-generation talent. Fellow artists wept openly, calling her a broken angel and a genius who never truly saw her own greatness. What do you think when you remember Amy Winehouse? Do you still feel the shock of her final day? Leave your thoughts in the comments.
John Bonham, 1948 to 1980. The morning of September 25, 1980, arrived with an unbearable silence at Jimmy Page's home. John Bonham, the thunder behind Led Zeppelin, was found unresponsive after a night of heavy drinking. He had gone to bed after consuming an extreme amount of alcohol, and sometime in the early hours, he choked in his sleep. No final words, no farewell, just a sudden, devastating end to one of the greatest drummers the world has ever known. When news broke, fans were stunned. How could the heartbeat of Led Zeppelin simply stop like that? Born in 1948, Bonham's rise to fame was meteoric. His drumming wasn't just sound, it was power, precision, and primal energy. Tracks like Moby Dick and When the Levee Breaks showcased his unmatched skill, while his influence spread across rock, metal, and even hip-hop decades later. He was a giant among musicians, a man whose hands shaped the sound of modern rock. But behind the brilliance was a long struggle with alcohol. Touring exhausted him, fame pushed him into extremes, and those who knew him spoke often of the two sides of Bonham, the warm friend and the man overtaken by drink. When he died, the band didn't replace him because they believed no one ever could. Do you remember where you were when you first heard John Bonham was gone? Share your memory below.
Bon Scott, 1946 to 1980. The night of February 19, 1980 began like so many others in Bon Scott's wild, reckless world. Loud music, drinks flowing endlessly, laughter echoing through London streets. But by dawn, everything had changed. After a night of heavy binge drinking, Bon was left in a car to sleep it off. Hours later, he was found lifeless, having choked on his own vomit. The coroner's report called it acute alcohol poisoning, a tragic, senseless end to one of rock's most electrifying frontmen. Fans around the world were stunned. How could the voice that powered AC/DC suddenly fall silent?
Born in 1946, Bon Scott was the embodiment of raw energy. With his raspy voice, fearless attitude, and unpredictable stage presence, he helped turn AC/DC into a global powerhouse. Albums like Highway to Hell transformed the band from rising stars into rock legends, and Bon's charisma became a signature of their early sound. His influence is still heard today in rock singers who chase that same gritty edge he mastered effortlessly. But behind the swagger was a man struggling with chaos. Constant touring, emotional turbulence, and the lifestyle soaked in alcohol created a storm he could never fully escape. When he died, fellow musicians mourned him as a brilliant spark gone far too soon. AC/DC themselves were shattered, yet they chose to continue, forever carrying Bon's spirit into every chord. What goes through your mind when you think of Bon Scott's final night? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments.
Dolores O'Riordan, 1971 to 2018. On January 15, 2018, the world lost a voice unlike any other. Dolores O'Riordan was found unresponsive in a London hotel room, the result of accidental drowning after drinking heavily. The news spread like a shockwave. How could a voice that once soared across stadiums end in such quiet tragedy? Fans, friends, and fellow artists struggled to make sense of it. Her passing felt unreal, as if one of the defining voices of the 90s had been abruptly muted in mid-song. Born in 1971 in Limerick, Ireland, Dolores rose from a humble childhood to become the global face of the Cranberries. Her soaring, emotional delivery in songs like Zombie and Linger captivated millions. She wasn't just a singer, she was a storyteller of pain, war, love, and vulnerability. Her band sold tens of millions of albums, and her influence stretched across genres and generations. But while the world heard strength in her voice, Dolores privately carried deep emotional wounds. She battled depression, trauma, and later bipolar disorder. Periods of instability, injuries, overwhelming pressure, and personal struggles made alcohol a dangerous companion in her weakest moments. When she died, the grief was universal. Ireland mourned the national treasure, fans worldwide left flowers and letters, and musicians paid tribute to the voice that shaped their youth. What do you feel when you hear Dolores O'Riordan's name today? Does a particular song still stay with you? Share it in the comments.
Vern Troyer, 1969 to 2018. April 21, 2018 marked a heartbreaking moment in Hollywood. Vern Troyer, loved worldwide for his unforgettable role as Mini-Me, was found unresponsive after a severe relapse into heavy drinking. His death was ruled a suicide caused by acute alcohol intoxication, a quiet, devastating end to a man who spent years fighting the shadows of addiction. The news stunned fans. How could someone who brought so much laughter carry so much pain inside? Born in 1969, Vern lived with a rare form of dwarfism, standing just over 80 centimeters tall. But his height never defined him. His talent, humor, and charisma carried him from small stunt roles to becoming a global pop culture icon through the Austin Powers films. He appeared in major productions like Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, earning admiration for his professionalism and comedic timing. Audiences loved him, and fellow actors described him as a gentle, kind soul who always tried to lift other spirits. Yet behind the fame, Vern struggled with lifelong emotional battles. He openly spoke about depression, trauma, and the pressure of being placed constantly under the public eye. Alcohol became both an escape and a dangerous enemy. Despite multiple stays in rehabilitation, the weight of his struggles eventually overwhelmed him. After his passing, tributes poured in. Fans thanked him for the joy he brought. Co-stars shared memories of his warmth, and many called for greater compassion for those silently fighting mental illness. When you remember Vern Troyer, what comes to mind first? The laughter he created, or the sadness of his final days? Share your thoughts below. David Cassidy, 1950 to 2017, was the day millions of fans around the world felt a piece of their childhood shatter. David Cassidy, once the golden boy of American television, died in a Florida hospital from organ failure caused by years of heavy drinking. In his final hours, doctors fought to save him as his liver and kidneys shut down. For many who grew up watching the Partridge Family, the news was almost unbelievable. How could the teen idol who once lit up every TV screen fade away in such a painful, quiet battle? Born in 1950, Cassidy rose to fame almost overnight. With his warm smile, soft voice, and effortless charisma, he became one of the biggest heartthrobs of the 1970s. I Think I Love You turned him into a global sensation, leading to sold-out concerts, magazine covers, and a level of fan hysteria rarely seen again. Beyond his teen idol image, he had a real musical talent, releasing multiple albums and influencing generations of young performers. But behind the shimmering spotlight, Cassidy struggled deeply. Fame isolated him, expectations suffocated him, and alcohol became a way to numb the pressure. Over the years, DUIs, health scares, and emotional breakdowns revealed a man fighting demons the world couldn't see. When he passed, tributes poured in from celebrities, co-stars, and generations of fans who had grown up with his music. Many said the same thing. David Cassidy didn't just entertain, he helped define an era. What about you? Do you remember your first memory of David Cassidy on screen or in song? Feel free to share it in the comments.
Jerry Rafferty, 1947 to 2011, January 4, 2011 marked the quiet end of a long, painful struggle. Jerry Rafferty passed away in London after severe liver failure brought on by decades of heavy drinking. There were no shocking headlines, no dramatic final incident, just a slow, heartbreaking decline that those close to him had feared for years. When the news broke, listeners around the world felt a deep ache. How could the gentle voice behind Baker Street, a song that had comforted millions, be taken by the very battle he tried so hard to hide? Born in Scotland in 1947, Rafferty grew up surrounded by music, eventually rising to fame in the 1970s with Steelers' Wheels hit Stuck in the Middle with You. But it was his solo masterpiece, Baker Street, that cemented him as a legend. That soaring saxophone, that melancholy melody, they became part of the cultural fabric of an entire generation. Rafferty was a gifted songwriter, blending folk, rock, and introspection into timeless works that still echo today. Yet behind the artistry was a man fighting deep emotional storms. He despised the pressures of fame, avoided public appearances, and withdrew further as alcoholism tightened its grip. Friends spoke of disappearances, hospital stays, and long battles with addiction. When he died, musicians paid tribute to his brilliance, calling him one of the most underrated songwriters of his era. When you hear Baker Street, does it stir something inside you? Nostalgia, sadness, or a memory from long ago? Share your thoughts in the comments.
Brian Connolly, 1945 to 1997. On February 9, 1997, the music world quietly lost one of its most dazzling voices. Brian Connolly, the charismatic frontman of the glam rock band Sweet, died after years of health complications tied to heavy drinking. By the time he reached the hospital, his body was already failing, his heart weak, his liver damaged, his kidneys struggling to keep him alive. There was no dramatic headline, only a sorrowful confirmation. The voice that once dominated the airwaves of the 1970s had faded for good. Fans who grew up with Ballroom Blitz and Fox on the Run felt the sting instantly. How could someone so vibrant, so electric, disappear so silently? Born in 1945, Brian Connolly helped shape the glam rock movement. His golden hair, soaring vocals, and magnetic stage presence turned Sweet into one of the most iconic acts of their era. They filled arenas, topped charts, and influenced countless rock bands who would come after them. Connolly was the face and sound of that glittering moment in music history, a symbol of youthful rebellion wrapped in sequins and power chords. But fame's brightness casts long shadows. Years of relentless touring, personal trauma, and heavy drinking chipped away at his health.
By the mid-1980s, his voice had weakened, his body had grown fragile, and he withdrew from the spotlight he once commanded with ease. When he died, tributes came from around the world. Fellow musicians remembered him as a pioneer, fans mourned the idol of their youth, and many lamented a life that burned far too fast. What's your strongest memory of Brian Connolly and Sweet? Does one of their songs still echo in your mind? Share it below.
George Best, 1946 to 2005. On November 25, 2005, the football world fell silent. George Best, the man once hailed as one of the greatest players in history, died after a long and painful decline brought on by years of heavy drinking. His final days were spent in a hospital bed, his organs failing, his body too weak to keep fighting. The image released shortly before his death, showing him frail and nearly unrecognizable, shocked millions. How could the boy wonder of Manchester United, the man who once danced past defenders with effortless magic, end up losing his final battle to alcohol? Born in Belfast in 1946, Best was a prodigy. By the time he was 22, he had already won the European Cup, earned the Ballon d'Or, and become a global superstar. With dazzling skill, movie star looks, and a mischievous charm, he transcended football. He was called the Fifth Beatle, a symbol of brilliance and limitless potential. But the spotlight he commanded so naturally brought immense pressure, and fame's temptations slowly tightened around him. Alcohol became his escape, and eventually his destroyer. His career declined too early. His health deteriorated, and even after a liver transplant in 2002, he couldn't escape the addiction that haunted him. When he died, tributes poured in from every corner of the globe. Fans cried in stadiums. Players, managers, and legends described him as the greatest talent ever produced by the British Isles. When you think of George Best, what memory stands out most? His breathtaking goals or the tragic fall that ended his life? Share your thoughts below.
Jani Lane, 1964-2011. On August 11, 2011, the glam metal world was shaken to its core. Jani Lane, the voice behind Warrant's biggest hits, was found lifeless in a Los Angeles hotel room, surrounded by the quiet, bleak remnants of a long struggle with alcohol. Toxicology reports later confirmed acute alcohol poisoning. For fans who had once watched him command arenas with explosive energy, the news felt surreal. How could a man who wrote some of the most iconic anthems of the late 80s end his life alone, trapped in a battle he couldn't win? Born in 1964 in Ohio, Jani Lane rose to fame as the lead singer and chief songwriter of Warrant. His gift for melody and storytelling created hits like Cherry Pie, Heaven, and I Saw Red, songs that defined an era of MTV, leather jackets, and stadium lights. Lane was more than a performer. He was a driving creative force, blending glam metal swagger with heartfelt emotion. His voice was instantly recognizable, his stage presence magnetic, his songwriting deeply personal. But behind the fame, Lane fought demons that never left him. Years of pressure, failed relationships, and personal trauma drove him deeper into alcohol addiction. His attempts at recovery were sincere, but short-lived, each relapse pulling him further from the spotlight he once dominated. Musicians across the rock world mourned him deeply, describing him as a brilliant talent burdened by overwhelming pain. Fans left tributes outside concert venues, remembering not just Cherry Pie, but the vulnerability in his quieter songs. When you think of Jani Lane, which memory comes back first? The rock star shining on stage, or the man who struggled behind the scenes? Share your thoughts below.
Jack Bruce, 1943 to 2014, marked the passing of one of rock's most extraordinary musicians. Jack Bruce, bassist, singer, and songwriter of the legendary band Cream, died after complications from liver disease, a condition worsened by long-term alcohol abuse. His final days were spent surrounded by family, But for fans around the world, the news felt like the closing of an entire chapter of rock history. How could the man whose playing redefined the bass guitar be gone forever? Born in Scotland in 1943, Jack Bruce was not just a bassist. He was a musical force, trained in jazz, fluent in blues, and fearless in experimentation. He helped create Cream's signature sound alongside Eric Clapton and Ginger Baker. His voice soared in classics like White Room and Sunshine of Your Love, and his innovative bass lines influenced generations of musicians. Many critics still rank him among the greatest bassists of all time. Yet brilliance often hides battles. Bruce struggled with addiction throughout his life, and the consequences eventually caught up with him. Even after a liver transplant in 2003, his health remained fragile, and alcohol remained a dangerous temptation. When he passed, tributes poured in from across the musical spectrum. Fellow artists praised his genius, fans thanked him for songs that shaped our youth, and the world acknowledged the loss of a pioneer whose creativity seemed limitless. When you listen to a Cream song today, what hits you first? The power of his voice or the depth of his bass lines? Share your thoughts below. Elizabeth Pena, 1959-2014. On October 14, 2014, Hollywood lost a powerful, beloved presence. Elizabeth Pena, known for her unforgettable roles in La Bamba, Lone Star, and Jacob's Ladder, died after suffering complications from cirrhosis of the liver caused by long-term alcohol abuse. Her final moments unfolded quietly in a Los Angeles hospital, far from the spotlight she had once commanded with such grace. When the news broke, it stunned audiences and colleagues alike. How could an actress so full of vitality, warmth, and fire be taken so suddenly? Born in 1959 to Cuban immigrant parents, Pena carved her own path in an industry that rarely made space for Latina actresses. She was fearless, versatile, and determined. From dramatic roles to dark thrillers, from comedy to voice acting, including the iconic Mirage in Pixar's The Incredibles, she proved again and again that she belonged at the very top. Her performance in Lone Star earned her an Independent Spirit Award, solidifying her status as one of the most respected Latina talents of her generation. But behind the achievements was a long, private battle. Pena kept her struggles hidden, known only to those closest to her. Years of alcohol use slowly weakened her body until it could no longer fight back. Her death prompted an outpouring of grief from fellow actors, directors, and fans who praised her trailblazing spirit. Many called her a pioneer, a woman who helped open doors for future generations of Latina performers. When you think of Elizabeth Pena, which role stands out most to you? Share your memory in the comments below.
John Cassavetes, 1929-1989. On February 3, 1989, the world of cinema dimmed. John Cassavetes, the visionary filmmaker who reshaped American independent cinema, died at his Los Angeles home after years of battling alcohol-related cirrhosis. His final days were marked by frailty and exhaustion, his body worn down by decades of relentless creative pressure and heavy drinking. When the news spread, filmmakers across the world grieved. How could the man who gave cinema some of its most raw, human stories be gone at just 59? Born in 1929, Cassavetes was more than a director. He was a revolution. His fiercely independent spirit challenged Hollywood's rigid system, birthing films like Faces, A Woman Under the Influence, and Opening Night. His work rejected polished perfection in favor of emotional truth, messy humanity, and unfiltered vulnerability. He inspired generations of filmmakers, from Martin Scorsese to the indie auteurs of today. As an actor, he delivered powerful performances in films like Rosemary's Baby and The Dirty Dozen, proving he excelled both in front of and behind the camera. But creativity came at a cost. Cassavetes poured everything, money, energy, and soul into his films. The emotional weight of his work, the financial strain of producing independently, and the pressure to constantly deliver brilliance pushed them deeper into heavy drinking. Friends spoke of a man burning himself from both ends, consumed by his passion. When he passed,
The film community mourned the loss of a pioneer whose influence would echo far beyond his lifetime. When you think of Cassavetes, what lingers most? His groundbreaking films or the raw humanity he brought to every story? Share your thoughts below.
Ladies and gentlemen, these 13 stars may have left us, but their echoes continue to linger in their songs, their films, their performances, and the memories they etched into the hearts of millions. Each of them shone brightly in their own way, yet each was pulled into a battle that fame, talent, and admiration could not shield them from. Their stories remind us that behind every spotlight lies a shadow, and behind every legend lies a human being struggling to survive. Do you remember any other moments from these stars that we haven't mentioned? Which of their performances still stays with you today? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice keeps their stories alive. And if you like more journeys into the untold stories of fame, don't forget to subscribe to the channel.